You know, from time to time, I do these videos that are to do with things other than shopping and luxury. And I've had a couple of you just recently asking me to do a video on how to manage and deal with difficult work colleagues, difficult co-workers. And this is anything that goes from people that are outright bullies and it's really hard to pin them down on it, through to people that are just frustrating to work with because they're maybe a bit lazy, they don't pull their weight, but they hide that really well as well. Or they just don't care and everyone knows it and they just don't care. The first thing to do is, when you think about a difficult colleague, I feel like it's quite important to kind of categorize where they sit in the hierarchy of frustrating people, because how you deal with them differs slightly. For example, if someone is difficult, like one of you was telling me that you had a real problem where you loved your job, but you were working with someone who constantly bullied, constantly undermined you. I feel like you told me that it was actually your manager, which makes it so difficult to do anything about. I have one example where that exact thing has happened to me, and there was one thing that I ended up, after trying everything, there was only one thing that I was able to do, and I'm going to come on to that in a second. So if you're dealing with someone who is manipulative, not very kind, maybe has a personal dislike for you, maybe they just don't like anyone and they do it to a few people, then you're going to treat them slightly different to someone who is perhaps like quite negative, brings the mood down, doesn't pull up their fair share of work. Maybe work gets distributed to everyone in your team and there's always that one person that says all the right words to the boss, that as soon as the boss has walked on, they're literally delegating their work to everyone else. They then collect it all back at the end and deliver it as their own. And it's the most frustrating thing because, again, I've got experience with people like this. They are so good at hiding it. The first thing to do, and this is going to sound really obvious, but it's the hardest thing to do, and it is to confront the person, depending on the category that they fall into and what it is exactly that they're doing. No one likes confrontation, whether it's you doing the confronting or whether it's them being at the receiving end of it. It puts you, in my opinion, as soon as you are the person to confront, particularly if you do it in a really calm way, like don't be aggressive, don't be emotional, don't like go for them even though you might be really angry at them. Do it in a really constructive way, and I feel like immediately, from a psychological point of view, it will put them on the back foot, because you're not going to be like, hi, can I talk to you about your behaviour please? You're doing it like you're almost catching them off guard by having a quick word when they don't already know what you're going to talk to them about, and therefore they've come up with a whole load of like things to come back at you out in their head. And I think it's important to do that before you necessarily go like over their head to a manager. Talking to the person outright very often can be better than going over their head and talking to someone that's above them. The reason being, if you go over the top of someone and they end up in trouble with someone higher up the food chain, it can make them like boil that you have got them in this kind of situation. I really think that talking to someone directly gives them the opportunity to know that you're aware of what they're doing and to correct it. I have found that a lot of people who are tricky to work with, even if they know they are and they know what they're doing, they're very good at like defending themselves and deflecting it. So it can be really difficult, but I think if you're the more mature person to go and talk to them, it already puts them on the back foot. There will be some people that don't even know they're doing it and will be very apologetic and will like the fact that you have been mature enough to go and talk to them about it and not go and get them in trouble with their boss. So give it a go, even if it's awkward. And I guarantee you, even though you will possibly have people you do with this with and it just like totally goes wrong, for most people don't have the guts to say to your face all the things that they're going to say behind your back. So again, when you're talking to that person, very few people are gonna like blow up in your face. I have had that once though, but very few people are going to do it. Escalating it to a manager. I never do this before I've already had a first conversation with them and it hasn't worked. Again, I just feel that if you're having to work really closely with someone, if they're already difficult, what you don't want to do is make them even more difficult. Right, I had a situation where there was a particular person who worked where we worked and no one got on with this person. And it was to do with the fact that they used to kind of get in late in the day. They'd always be the first person to leave. If they got given work, they'd push it to everyone else to do, but they'd do it in a way where, I mean, in the end it caught up with them, but they did it in a way where management never knew they were doing it. All management would ever see is when that person had collected all the work up at the end and presented it as their own. They were just very adept at getting what they wanted and doing as little as possible. And what I never understood, how boring your day must be if all you're doing is trying to push as much work onto other people as possible. And this person was brazen. Like, you'd look over and they'd literally be on like ASOS, like shopping, or like they didn't care. I had a word with this person. They did blow up. They were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, look, it's kind of quite obvious here. In the end, that didn't work. And I did end up having to go to the next person above me because the amount of stress that it was causing and the amount of work that I had building up, not just my own, but this person's, just got out of control. And it turned out that management were already well aware of this person and things did start to change. That was like one situation where I'd already tried going direct, and then I had to like go on to the next level, but fundamentally it did correct the problem in a way that was amicable for everyone. That, like, don't be rude, you don't need to be rude, and actually being rude, even if the person is being aggressive and rude with you, it just makes them look like a pillock. And then the final thing to do, and this is, I've done this once actually in a particular situation, but I've left. So, and there's two ways you can leave. If you work for a big enough company, you can ask to be transferred potentially internally to a different team. Now again, what you need to think here is if you've been having problems with a certain person, let's say that person's got a particular issue with you as opposed to anyone else. If you've dealt with it professionally, you're going to potentially have a better time when it comes to transferring to another team, because what you don't want to do is for that person to have tarnished your name, for them to flip it back round on you, that it was never them that was difficult, it was you. And trust me, a lot of these people, the manipulative ones, are very good at doing this. So you can look to transfer internally. Another thing you could do, and as I said, I did this once, is after trying to resolve a situation that was actually quite difficult to resolve because it involved my direct manager, I decided to leave. And in fact, when I handed in my notice, it was really a shame because the directors above this person said, oh, I wish you told us, because we were well aware of what was going on there and what she was doing. And it's like, oh, well, I wish you told me, because I've literally had like 3 years of hell. So leaving sometimes, even if you don't want to, is the only option. And you know, sometimes life's got a funny way of pushing you on to the next thing. Maybe you've been at that company a while and you just like, you've got comfortable there, or maybe there is a better job around the corner, and if it hadn't been for that person pushing you, you would never have left. So sometimes in that situation, I look back and I'm like, thank you. You pushed me on to something better. I also want to reiterate though, if you are going through anything at the moment, you are not alone. There are people in all walks of life, not just at work, but even in their private life. There are people at school, there are people at college that are going through this, and there are ways of mitigating it. There are also, another thing you need to think about is a lot of people, we only look at people on the top surface. You do not realise what's going on in their private lives. Like, they might have gone through a bereavement or a breakup, or something terrible might have happened and it's coming through in their behaviour. And I feel like this is another reason why it's really important to be kind to people. And even if they've been a complete a-hole to you, just be professional about it, because you just don't know what's going on in their life. If any of you have got any topics that you would like me to talk about in the coming weeks and months, please leave them below and I'll pick out the best, or the ones where lots of you are saying, yeah, this topic's good, and I will shout you out in those videos. The other thing I was going to say is, if any of you have experience dealing with difficulties in the workplace, please can you comment below on how you dealt with those situations, or if you're currently going through them right now, how you are dealing with them. It's really interesting to share it, like your knowledge with other people. And again, whenever I've done these videos, the amount of information that comes back from people going, actually what you suggested, I tried that, it didn't work, but I did this and it did work. It just helps everyone reading here. So that would be very appreciated. Thank you again for watching. I will see you in the next video.